in sports, you can be as good as you possibly can on the business side. If you don't have the results on the field, you're not going to maximize what you can do. So we talked a lot about being prepared for success, not knowing exactly what it would come. And eventually when it came, we were ready.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Petkoff. Ryan runs Petkoff Strategies, his consulting group that he started in 2024, following 18 years at the Hunt Sports Group, which is the company on top of the Kansas City Chiefs and FC Dallas. So Ryan, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, Brent, excited to be on with you.
Well, it's been great to chat with you a couple times over the last month or so, both in person here in Dallas and on a couple other calls. But take us back. You joined Hunt Sports Group and working with the Chiefs in 2006. 2007, 2008, 2009, the team went 4-12, 2-14, and 4-12. And then you fast forward to the 2010s and early 2020s, there were 10 plus straight winning seasons, 7 straight AFC championship appearances. They've appeared in 5 out of the last 6 Super Bowls. There are obviously some key characters that played into that turnaround, the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but talk about the transition, the leadership, the personas, and what you experienced in having seen the team at, frankly, kind of the bottom of the league for a few years there at the beginning to being the greatest franchise of the modern era.
So it was certainly some lean years there in the beginning. I started when I was 24 in 2006, and that team made the playoffs. Herm Edwards was the coach, and they made the playoffs, kind of a one and done. And then after that, it was a commitment to rebuilding. And that rebuilding process took some time. And so it was a real struggle on the field for the Chiefs, but it turned into a real opportunity for me as a young guy trying to figure out what he wanted to do and work in the sports business. And so from that period, kind of 2006 and 7, all the way up until 2012, 13, there was a massive overhaul that happened on the football side, but also on the business side. And so there were a lot of folks in the organization that had been there for a long time, and there was a lot of opportunity to grow and make some positive changes. So while we were working on the football side to kind of turn things around to varying degrees of success, there was one other playoff season between 2006 and 2013. The business side operation got a full overhaul. And that was a real opportunity for me as a young guy to learn. I like to say I got an MBA, but it was just working in the sports business. I got to work in all of the different departments and work kind of across the business side and work with the football side a little bit. And it was really a pivotal time for me in just to be able to grow up and learn how to do business by working in the sports business.
Describe what you mean in a little more detail when you say overhaul.
In 2006, the Chiefs had the same leadership for 20 years, and they had gone from a period of being very successful in the 80s and a little bit of a run with Dick Vermeil in the early 2000s. And so the Chiefs organization from a business standpoint had gone from being one of the top in the league in the 80s to falling behind the times a little bit. And so there was an opportunity to, really overhaul almost every department that was there. And there was great leadership brought in, and I was able to work with that leadership. And I like to say that I was a little bit of the fireman. Whenever there was a fire, I was called on to put it out. So there was a season where I was the interim PR director, talking with the coach and the quarterback after the game, working on our overall message and that kind of stuff. I helped retool the brand. I helped work with all of the different departments over the course of that time. So it was a great opportunity for me. And so we were able to do only so much on the business side. In sports, you can be as good as you possibly can on the business side. And if you don't have the results on the field, you're not going to maximize what you can do. So we talked a lot about being prepared for success, not knowing exactly what it would come. And eventually when it came, we were ready.
Talk about the difference in commercial or business opportunities that are available to a team when things are good compared to when you're down at the bottom. How does that change your ability to really get big landmark deals done and from the business side?
Well, it is every team wants to sell hope in the NFL, NBA, whatever. Like, you're selling hope every season. It's a lot harder to sell hope on the backs of 4-12, 2-14. Eventually, it kind of comes to call. It is a lot easier to say, look, we're established. We're on, prime time in the maximum 5 slots and getting flexed into a 6. We're playing playoff games at Arrowhead, things like that. Like, all of a sudden, you've got people coming out of the woodwork that want to be your partners. And so you really find out right, kind of what you're made of in those tough times, and you get really organized and strategic as a business, right? And hopefully you really grow with those partners that were with you in the tough times. And, I think the Chiefs have seen that. Other teams that have had down years and success have seen that with a handful of core partners. And so, that's great. It is much better to be in a position where you're going to, 7 straight AFC championship games. And part of that is there's just some financial automatic things that happen, right? So you do your partnership deal with your, big partners in all the categories. There are, contract incentives or, where you hit the playoffs and automatically it bumps up. You hit a Super Bowl and it bumps up. And if you do that enough, you're maximizing the value of those deals, and B, you're in a great position to renew them. And so that's why success really has a great tailwind with it on the business side.
So I gotta address that you have the coolest background of any guest I've ever had on the show, with 3 Lombardis sitting back there. Obviously, like as I mentioned earlier, 2 key characters in making those happen were Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Can you talk about how things changed under Reid, and then of course having Mahomes just light the league on fire?
Yeah, 100%. So in all of my, almost 20 years in the NFL, I was around a lot of different folks, right? I was able to attend NFL owners meetings for 15 plus years, got to know a lot of different people around the league, and we had a number of coaches and GMs come through. Andy Reid is one of one. It's just nobody like him. And when he came into the building, he brought with him, not only the aura of being Big Red, but he had a plan and he executed from day one, right? He knew he's a super detail oriented guy. And so when he was, coming in the building, he was not coming by himself. He had a coaching staff lined up. He had a training staff lined up. He had, he knew all of the aspects of the business or of the football side from, having a great run in Philly. And he also knew what he wanted to do a little bit differently. And so he hit the ground running. And so it wasn't just Andy that showed up. Andy showed up with all his people, and they really got after it. And that first season with him showed. The team went from 2-14, won 9 straight games to start the season. And there were some decent players on the roster, some very good players, but just Andy revolutionized the whole thing. And he's, like I said, he's one of one. I haven't been around a leader that touches him in any aspect in my career.
How would you describe his leadership style in a nutshell?
He is a great relationship builder to start. He genuinely cares about the people that he works with, players, coaches, everybody in the building. He's got a big heart, and he really does care. And he earns, I think, the trust from people that way. It's not fake, it's authentic. And so it starts there. The other thing that he's extremely gifted at and he's worked at is his ability as a teacher. He comes from, I think his mom was a teacher. He was, at one time, I think, flirting with the idea of becoming a teacher if he wasn't a coach. And in my experience, the best coaches are teachers first. They understand not only what they want to install and instill in someone, they understand how the other person learns and how to communicate that information. And so people often think that coaching and teaching is just about the players, but for a head coach, it's coaching the coaches, right? It's being able to describe what you want and hold people accountable to get it, but also give them the tools to understand what that is, how they can achieve it. And so there's some argument, but Andy Reid to me is the greatest head coach of all time, not only for what he's done on the field, but his lineage, like his coaching tree. At one point in the league, 25% of all the coaches, 8 of the 32, were either Andy Reid or Andy Reid disciples, right? Like his guys have gone on to win championships, playing championship games, turnaround programs. That to me speaks to the quality not only of him as a coach, but as a teacher and someone who cares about people enough to develop them.
During that era, something that feels a little bit underreported potentially is the way that Alex Smith handled the transition and torch passing, and really, from what I understand, fostered serious mentorship for Patrick Mahomes in that first year or two, where he basically knew, look, he knew this guy is so special. This is not going to be my job for long. But instead of taking that the wrong way, from all accounts, it sounds like he really just poured into a young guy and helped him out. Were you able to witness any of that? Because that sounds like really special and seems to be a really key chapter in laying the foundation for what ended up being probably the greatest player of the last decade. So, I mean, was that something that you got to experience somewhat firsthand?
in 2017, when Patrick was drafted, it was a super exciting time, right, for everybody in the organization. And we went from 27 to 10 in that round, and traded up and got him. And great night, right? Thursday night, first round pick. Chiefs drafted a quarterback in the first round for the first time in a long time. So super exciting. The next morning, I get up super early. I go to the facility to work out. This is like, I don't know, 6 a.m. And the first person and the only person in there is Alex Smith. So the day after Patrick's drafted, he's not hemming and hawing. He's not calling his agent. He's doing his work. He's steady and consistent, and he's on the job, right? And it's one small example of a million examples that you could talk about Alex and his character. There was no letdown from him. There was no trying to undermine any situation. He wasn't a diva about anything. He was a professional, and he went to work. And he's also, in addition to being a really great quarterback, he's a good man. And if you look at some of the work he's done with his foundation and some of the ways that he and his wife have invested in the communities where they played, it shows that. So there couldn't have been a better person to have in those rooms and in the building than Alex. And he led the team that year, even though that could have been a distraction. He led the team to the divisional round of the playoffs, a great record. I remember we went into the Patriots on their Super Bowl banner night and just beat the fire out of them with Alex. And so like he's one of the most special guys, I think, that could have been in that situation. And his life after football will be, he'll be successful in whatever he does because that's his character.
So in transitioning a little more to the business side, obviously Clark Hunt is the owner of the team and the face of this Hunt Sports Group that you were working for. Also owns FC Dallas, also was a tremendous college soccer player at SMU. I mean, the Hunt family is on the Mount Rushmore of football families and NFL families. Huge legacy there. And he's very much recognizable as that owner. There are some teams where you ask even a relatively tuned-in fan who's the owner, they might not be able to place them. That's simply not the case with the Chiefs. What are some of the things that you learned from Clark Hunt?
When it comes to American sports, the Hunt family, and specifically Lamar Hunt, I mean, he's a pioneer and icon. And Clark had, a big legacy and a big pair of shoes to fill there. And I think he did a nice job and has done a nice job charting his own path, right? There could only be one Lamar Hunt. One of the things that always stood out to me about Clark was work ethic, right? Here's a guy who, for all accounts, doesn't have to work, right? It wasn't like that was a necessity, but he's an extremely hard worker and extremely dedicated to whatever work is in front of him. And so that trickles down right throughout the organization. And we get to work really closely together from the time where his father was still alive and he was behind the scenes until, getting to see him lift the trophy that bears his dad's name in the middle of Arrowhead Stadium. And that journey was very gratifying for me specifically. And I think for both of us to see that happen. What the other piece that I think is really important there is he hires really good people and gets out of their way, right? He lets people do their job. Now, he'll certainly give input like any good leader should, but he's not questioning Andy Reid's play call. He's not saying we need to draft this person over the next person. And I think that really empowers the leadership to, stay the course on some things. I think you can find other examples in other leagues and in the NFL where maybe that's not the case. And it's obviously been successful for him. So I would say that work ethic and that ability to, hire good people and, give them what they need to do their jobs has yielded a lot of success.
You talked about coming on board at age 24 and clearly being willing to wear a lot of hats, as you said. But for people who listen to this, there are plenty of younger people who want to understand how they can work in sports, how they can find a career path like yours. Yeah. And I've heard, other people I've spoken to who have done somewhat similar stuff. It never seems to be very conventional. When you have young people asking you, how do I do what you did? What are the direct pieces of advice you give them?
Probably a couple times a month, I'll get someone that's like, hey, my son, my daughter would love to work in sports. Can you meet with them? Can you have coffee? Can you, jump on a call, and tell them? And I'm always happy to do that. I love kind of getting around, folks that want to work in sports and talking through that. But there's not a linear path, from kind of how I started and my path. what I normally tell folks in that position, depending on their age, is you've got to be plugged into what's going on in the business, right? It's one thing to follow the ESPN ticker and kind of know what's going on and, listen to the right podcast and be in the know of what's happening on the court or what's on the field. But people are hiring in sports for what's happening in the business, right? And so if you can show a command or at least an understanding of the key things in how the sports business works and what are the drivers, I think that gives you a leg up. So sports business journal, front office sports, reading the trades, being up on that stuff, that's an important piece. Another piece is you've got to start relationship building as soon as possible. That doesn't need to happen, in May in your graduation year. If you want to work in sports, you need to be cultivating these relationships at whatever level that you can as best as you can, because sports is inherently a relationship business. And I can't tell you how many people that have, I met younger people in the organization, things like that, who they knew somebody who knew somebody, and that's how they got the interview. Now, I'm not saying it's nepotism or favoritism, anything like that. It's just how it works, because certainly there's a lot of people that are interested. You've got to separate yourself, and one of the best ways to separate yourself is through a warm introduction. And so LinkedIn is a great tool. And I'm not saying you're not going to get to an owner on LinkedIn. You need to be specific about, hey, I want to work in partnership. I want to work in partnership activation is even better. Or I want to work in operations, stadium operations. Well, let's dive into who those people are at the, let's call it, manager level, director level. Let's start building relationships there without asking for anything other than counsel. Tell me what you do. Tell me why you like what you do. People love to talk about what they're doing to someone who's genuinely curious. So I think that's a good start. And that's typically the advice that I give. And I'm always happy to help somebody, but you got to really, it's not enough just to want it. You've got to put some action behind it.
So, as somebody who was very involved on multiple occasions, I want to now talk about the business behind the Super Bowl and what goes into that. I feel like this is obviously timely with the Super Bowl next week.
Sure.
But I mean, it is such a production. I can't even imagine where a team, an organization begins when it comes to maximizing what a specific franchise can get out of that experience before the game has started, after the game has ended, all the behind the scenes work. Can you take us down memory lane, I guess, since you were there on multiple occasions? What is the behind the scenes work from the business side look like when your team makes the Super Bowl?
Sure. So what I didn't know until, we got there after the 2018 season, and I just mean the championship games. It starts before the championship games. So all of the teams who are in the AFC and NFC championship games send advanced teams to the Super Bowl site to pre-scout, because 2 weeks is not nearly enough time. So you can't wait until you've won the game. And the first time that happened, it was like, this is a huge jinx. We can't be sending people, sports people are very superstitious, but it was an eye-opening thing of like, no, this is how it works. So that's the first piece. Is the planning goes on, a full month in advance, or at least that would be 3 weeks in advance.
So really as soon as you've won the divisional game, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're that Monday. The playoffs for the business side is a series of very stressful, long-hour Mondays, right? So you win the game, you're super excited, and you're in the office super early the next day, and we're planning for the next run, right? We're planning for how are we maximizing the championship game? What is everybody, everybody's got their plans, but what are we doing to enhance and make sure? And so that's why once you've done it a few times, you get really good. And so we're talking about maximizing the commercial opportunity for the Super Bowl, and we look at these two franchises that are in it now. The Patriots have a huge leg up on the Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks went a couple of times in the early 2010s, right? The Patriots have been like 11 times in this century. So the Patriots gave us some tips when we started going on, just the commercial side. Certainly not on the football side. That's not how they roll. But on the business side.
Talk about the evolution that you witnessed going back to 2006 to today, where I would assume that in the mid 2000s, it was basically, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but like a set of available partnership inventory, mostly in person in the stadium. Social media was not so much of a thing. You were not engaging with fans digitally. There was certainly no level of personalization like you see today. How much did that landscape and that angle of things change and probably explode in terms of size and scope over those years?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost too far back to describe describe changes, because I think there's been several iterations in between that, right? In 2006, we didn't have the iPhone. So like I mean, I'm dating myself there, but we didn't have the iPhone. The world dramatically changed with that creation, right? In terms of the personalization, all of the one-to-one marketing that is the next landscape of that. So, I think the smart teams and under the leadership there of Mark Donovan at the Chiefs, the Chiefs have been one of the smarter ones. And the league has done a great job too of, maximizing the opportunities in kind of new landscapes, right? So you've seen that with where the NFL started with social media to where they are now. The NFL has completely embraced creators in its marketing platform. That's a shift under Tim Ellis that happened when he joined the league 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know the exact date. Where normally it was, you see the rights thing at the end of the broadcast every week that says, hey, you can't record and repurpose this. The NFL still holds on to its rights pretty hard, but they're very open to new ways of reaching new fans, right? And so that's going to open up a lot of commercial opportunities for a lot of different players that maybe weren't in the, big categories that we classically think of when we think of commercial rights. So yeah, it's changed. It's changed dramatically. And I think it's changing again, right? I think more than any other time in the world, we want exactly what we want when we want it, right? So there's a huge push at the NFL and other leagues to get this one-to-one marketing thing down, and no one has it down yet. But I think that's the next wave of this.
I know that one of the things that you led from an initiative standpoint was building out and making the Chiefs brand much more global and bring it to a global scale and engaging a global fan base. Talk about what went into that and where you see the future of the globalization of fandom, I guess specifically through the lens of the NFL, where you see that going in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, no, it was super exciting to help launch the Global Markets Program for the Chiefs and to kind of work on growing our brand both nationally and internationally. And the idea really was rooted in a lot of what the brand was itself, right? This is a team that was started by Lamar Hunt. And Lamar Hunt started the American Football League because football was in a little part of the Northeast. The NFL was concentrated primarily there. And he thought, look, there are football fans everywhere. We need to expand. We need to bring the game to more of them. And it's that same idea, right, that the Chiefs and the NFL as a whole have, which is we've got a great product here. We've got some of the best storylines that you could come up with, and we don't even have to generate them. It happens on its own. There certainly will be people that want to latch onto it in other markets. And so I was excited when the league put the program together, and we were first movers in a lot of that to Mexico and Germany, and it's since expanded beyond that. But I light up when I talk about connecting fans with their team, because it's the most fun part of sports, right? When you get to see somebody really kind of grow in a connection with their team, there's nothing better than that. And so going over to Germany and playing the game over there in 2022, you could see it. I mean, and we did a lot of things to build, the brand and build some awareness over there. But until you actually get on the ground and kind of do, face to face and interact in person, you don't really get to appreciate it. So it was incredible. I think it's a super smart initiative for any team to do, but it's not a good business right away, right? It's a long tail play. And certainly the Chiefs were the first team to have a 7-figure partnership year in Germany. And there's certainly a lot of commercial opportunities. You've got to be willing to invest. And so when I say it's not a good business right away, it's an investment. So you can't look at it as an automatic return. You have to look at it as on a longer time horizon. We set out a 5-year plan and 5-year P&L with that, and kind of built it like a startup where we could iterate, fail fast, and then take what we learned and plug it into different markets, right, to scale it. And I think they're continuing to have a lot of success there. And it's a huge bucket for the NFL future growth revenue.
No doubt. I mean, you talk about fans being everywhere. I had Kyle Israel on the podcast a couple months ago, and he's with Momentous Sports Group. He is based in Berlin. He played some European professional football back, 15 or so years ago. He was telling me that there was an NFL game, I guess it was in Berlin, somewhere in Germany, a couple years ago, where the Ticketmaster wait list had 400,000 people on it. Yeah. Which blew my mind. I mean, that tells you everything about it as an emerging market that is probably worthy of some serious investment.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering. And Germany specifically has a big base of American football fans. I think it's a country of 80 million people, and I think the last metrics I saw was it's north of 3 million avid American football fans, which sounds like a small number, but for a Western European market, that's actually a really, really engaged fan base. And then there's certainly people, avid is your top level, and then there's certain levels, beyond that. But it is ripe for growth. There's a huge appetite for it. And now with social, they can follow the storylines, kind of on their time. It's a 7-hour difference. So your noon games or primetime games, they've got great presenters. They're not announcers over there. They're presenters. I actually was on the phone with one yesterday. What the guy that I would say is he's the Joe Buck or the Jim Nance of German American football announcing. And we talk, he's a great guy, but there's a lot of passion there and there's a lot of opportunity for growth. So that's just Germany. Brazil in South America, there's some tremendous opportunities there. London's had, the games over there for a long time. France is a market where they're looking. Spain, I think, has a tremendous amount of opportunity, in that stadium that Real Madrid just built is incredible. So yeah, no, the NFL looks at it as a $1 billion bucket for the future. Like it's a $1 billion opportunity for them. And so yeah, no, there's a lot of upside to global growth.
Yeah. I mean, also, I think like a kind of moonshot 10 years from now idea that might play a factor in the globalization of these things is the concept of supersonic flight. Companies like Boom Arrow that has these planes that can get people from New York to London, and however much they cut the time down by. Truly, I mean, that will change the way that people travel to games, and that the world gets smaller, but the market gets bigger. That was just there's something crazy is going to happen there, I'm sure, in the long term. Let's transition a little bit to what you're doing now with Petkoff Strategies. At what point did you start thinking, okay, I've led these huge projects, I've launched these big initiatives, I now have this body of work behind me where I feel confident that it's time to go off on my own and launch something? Number one, let's start there. What was when did the gears start turning where you felt like, I think I can do some of this on my own?
Yeah, well, the gears turned a little bit slowly. I'll be very transparent with that. It wasn't something that I had in mind throughout the last 5 years, but certainly after the third Super Bowl, I had gotten to a place in my career where I was hitting a ceiling and was looking at some other opportunities. And my wife and I had just had a daughter, and one of the things I had in my previous life was a lot of travel, a lot of long hours, things like that. And so um, I had been working with a number of folks, and decided to formalize that when I left, and that's kind of grown into what Petkoff Strategies is. And so I've worked with some NFL teams, I've worked with some emerging leagues, some sports tech companies, and I've loved the diversity of experiences that I've been able to do. And it always comes back to a handful of things. And on my initial calls, this is typically it. Like, what's keeping you up at night? And typically there's one or two problems, and we sit down, and if I'm a good fit to help you fix it, then we'll work together. And if not, I'll try to find somebody that is. But that's been the genesis of it. Been doing it for the better part of a year, and it's been a lot of fun.
Splitting it into two buckets, and I'll let you kind of restate what your services are and who you serve. But you've got teams and emerging leagues, and then you have earlier stage businesses from kind of the seed level through Series C, and helping them navigate the sports tech landscape. In those two buckets, what are the areas where the teams and leagues are feeling the most pain, and where are the areas where the startup founder might feel the most lost and is like, I need help from an insider like Ryan?
I would separate the teams and leagues. One of the value adds that I have with the team, and I experienced this before, is when you hire an outside agency at an NFL team, NBA team, whatever, the agency spends a good deal of time trying to understand and learn your business. And typically, if a team's going to hire an outside agency, they're doing it because they have something that needs to be solved, right? And so that learning curve goes down quite a bit when you hire someone like me, right? I kind of understand what we're doing from a business standpoint, and we can hit the ground running. I also bring to bear, 20 years of a wide range of experience at a lot of different levels in NFL and MLS teams, and so that's valuable from an advisory standpoint. I was a part of several head coach, GM, team president searches, right? So that comes with a multi-layered thing. One, we got to find the right person. The other element is we've got to communicate what we're doing. We got to do it in a strategic way. We've got different stakeholders that are involved in that. We've got fans, we've got employees internally, we've got partners, and not everybody can know everything right away. So how do we triage it? How do we tier that? So there's a strategy that goes into that. And from a marketing standpoint, right? How are we connecting with our fans? Are we leaving opportunities out there? Are we not doing enough? So that's some elements. Leagues are different because sports is such an investable asset class right now. There's so much interest, as you know, Brent, in sports investing. We're seeing a lot of leagues pop up. Yep. And I have a soft spot for emerging leagues, having worked for Lamar Hunt, who was a serial league founder. And there's a lot of opportunity out there, but there's also a lot of noise. And so how do you navigate that? What do you do structurally to make it investable? What do you do from an audience and distribution channel build? What are we doing there? What do we have already? Is there a marketplace for it? So that's some of it.
On the startup side, how about the founders? Where are the things maybe where they say, Ryan, I know what I have to do, but I genuinely don't even know where to start. Help me, be my guide here.
I would say, Brent, that most founders that I've interacted with have a very clear idea of what they want to do and where they want to go, and where I fit in is the how. And so for someone that has been investable at seed to Series C, they have some capital and some runway, but they may not have the ability to hire a CMO, a chief strategy officer, someone to handle comms, someone to all of these things. And I can wear multiple hats in a situation like that. So I can help you with your go-to-market strategy. If that go-to-market strategy involves partnership development, right? I can pick up the phone and call people in my network. I can help you build the brand to the extent that you need that. But also, every single company is just trying to solve a problem, right? They are solving a problem for someone, and they need more people to know about it. And so it can become a pretty easy blocking and tackling thing if we have the right strategy behind it. So that's an element where I've seen a lot of opportunity. I talk to a lot of founders, and there's a lot of really cool stuff going on right now. And so it's how do you maximize the runway that you have, and get either to the next raise or get your product in enough hands.
Within the sports tech world or the sports startup world where you're advising and helping a lot of these founders, what are maybe one or two subcategories within that space that you're most excited or bullish about looking forward 5 to 10 years?
Sure. Well, I've got to shout out a client, Clutchshot's AI. What they have built from a computer vision and AI highlight creator standpoint is next level. And they're really solving a massive problem for youth sports parents. So I think youth sports is a subcategory that has tremendous potential, and Clutchshots is doing a great job of that. It's a $40-50 billion marketplace that's completely fragmented, and we're already seeing that over the last 5 years of institutional investment coming in and trying to get everybody on the same page around a few things. But that's a subcategory that has tremendous growth potential.
Wrapping up here, just kind of restate, who are the people out there who need to check you out and reach out to you if they're feeling a certain sort of pain or struggle within their early stage business, their team, their league, and then where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. It's been great to be on with you. So I help teams and leagues solve their biggest problems, and I help sports tech companies go from 0 to 1. And I can help advise legacy business do everything in between. And you can find me at petkoffstrategies.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, soon to be on YouTube, but I haven't done that yet. So yeah, looking forward to it. It's been really great to be on with you today.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, Brent.